The helicopter screamed through the dark sky like a wounded bird. Its metal body shuddered violently as warning alarms flashed red across the cockpit. Inside the aircraft, fear gripped every man like a tightening fist. One of the hardened Navy SEALs looked at the spinning gauges and shouted the words none of them ever thought they would say. "We're going to die." The wind howled outside, rain hammered the windshield, and the helicopter lurched sideways as if the sky itself wanted to tear it apart. Inside the dim cabin, bloodied soldiers clung to their seats while the pilot fought desperately with the failing controls. The mission had already gone terribly wrong. Now, thousands of feet above the ocean in the middle of a raging storm, survival felt impossible. Before we continue this powerful story, take a quick moment to support the channel. If you believe in courage, second chances, and the power of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, make sure to like the video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this one. The helicopter had taken off from a small military base less than 40 minutes earlier. The mission had been urgent. A Navy SEAL team had completed a dangerous nighttime operation along a remote coastline. But during the extraction, several soldiers were wounded, and the weather had suddenly turned violent. Dark storm clouds swallowed the sky, and lightning ripped through the horizon like jagged cracks in the night. The aircraft carrying them was a medical evacuation helicopter. Inside were 4 Navy SEALs, 2 severely injured soldiers strapped to stretchers, a veteran pilot, a flight medic, and one person who no one expected to matter in a moment like this. A rookie nurse named Emily Carter. Emily was only 26 years old. She had joined the Navy as a medical officer less than a year earlier. This was supposed to be a routine transport mission, stabilize the wounded, monitor their vitals, and assist the medic if needed. She had trained hard for months, memorizing medical procedures, emergency protocols, and battlefield trauma care. But no training manual had ever prepared her for this. The helicopter jolted violently again. The pilot struggled with the control stick as warning lights flashed like angry eyes across the dashboard. One of the engines had taken damage during takeoff, possibly from debris or mechanical failure. Now the aircraft was losing power. Rain poured down so heavily that visibility had dropped to almost nothing. Inside the cabin, the wounded soldiers groaned in pain. The medic tried to keep pressure on a bleeding wound while also glancing nervously toward the cockpit. The aircraft suddenly dipped several hundred feet. A SEAL slammed his hand against the wall to steady himself. That was when someone shouted the words that echoed through the entire cabin. "We're going to die." For a moment, silence followed. These were Navy SEALs, elite warriors trained to stay calm in the worst situations imaginable. Men who had survived firefights, ambushes, and impossible missions. But even they knew the truth. If the helicopter crashed into the dark ocean below, no one would survive. Emily felt her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Her hands trembled as she tried to focus on the injured soldier beside her. The monitor beeped weakly. The man's breathing was shallow. She forced herself to stay calm. Focus. Help the patients. That was her job. Then something happened that changed everything. Another violent shake ripped through the helicopter. The pilot shouted something over the noise, but his voice was lost beneath the roaring wind. The control panel sparked briefly. The helicopter dropped again. This time, the pilot slumped forward. At first no one understood what had happened. Then the medic rushed toward the cockpit. The pilot had been struck by flying debris during the turbulence. Blood trickled from a cut above his temple, and he had lost consciousness. The helicopter was now flying through a storm with no one controlling it. Panic exploded inside the cabin. The aircraft tilted dangerously, its nose dipping downward. One of the SEALs grabbed the doorway to the cockpit, staring at the lifeless pilot and the flashing controls. None of them were trained to fly a helicopter. The ocean below was invisible in the darkness. The storm was growing worse. And the helicopter was falling. Emily felt the world narrowing around her. This can't be happening. Her mind raced through the chaos, searching for something, anything, that could help. Then a distant memory surfaced. During her training months earlier, she had once sat inside a simulator with a helicopter instructor. It hadn't been official pilot training. Just a brief orientation while waiting for another medical drill to begin. The instructor had joked that every crew member should at least know the basics of the cockpit, just in case. Emily remembered laughing nervously as he explained the controls. Back then, it had seemed pointless. Now it was the only hope they had. Without thinking, Emily stood up. The helicopter lurched again, nearly throwing her against the wall. The medic grabbed her arm. "Where are you going?" Emily's voice shook, but her eyes were determined. "I think I can keep it in the air." For a moment, no one moved. A rookie nurse? Fly the helicopter? It sounded insane. But the alternative was certain death. The SEAL standing near the cockpit looked into Emily's eyes. He saw fear there, but also something stronger. Courage. He stepped aside. "Then do it." Emily slid into the pilot's seat, her hands trembling as she looked at the complex dashboard. Dozens of switches and gauges glowed in the dark cockpit. Her breathing became shallow. Think. Remember the simulator. The helicopter dipped again. She grabbed the control stick. Slowly. Carefully. The aircraft steadied, just slightly. Her heart pounded. She adjusted the throttle the way the instructor had once shown her. The helicopter stopped falling. Inside the cabin, everyone felt it. The sudden, fragile stability. One of the SEALs whispered in disbelief. "She's actually flying it." But the storm was far from over. Lightning flashed outside the cockpit, illuminating massive clouds that looked like towering walls of darkness. Rain slammed into the windshield, and the helicopter continued to shake violently. Emily focused on the instruments. Altitude. Speed. Engine power. Her mind raced as she tried to remember every tiny detail from that brief training session months earlier. The radio crackled. A distant voice from the base attempted to make contact, but the signal was weak. Emily swallowed hard. "I just have to keep us in the air," she whispered to herself. Behind her, the medic continued working on the wounded soldiers. The SEALs helped stabilize equipment and keep the patient secure. Minutes felt like hours. Every gust of wind threatened to flip the helicopter. Emily's arms began to ache from gripping the controls so tightly. Then the storm intensified. A massive gust slammed the helicopter sideways. Warning alarms screamed again. The aircraft spun dangerously. Emily fought the controls with everything she had. "No, no, stay with me." She adjusted the pedals and throttle. Slowly. Carefully. The spin stopped. The helicopter stabilized again. Inside the cabin, the SEALs stared at the cockpit in stunned silence. The rookie nurse had just saved them from crashing. But they still had miles to go. Fuel was dropping. Visibility was almost zero. And Emily had never landed a helicopter before. The base radio signal finally became clearer. A calm voice guided her through the storm. "Maintain altitude, follow heading 270, you're doing great." Emily focused on every instruction. Her entire world had narrowed to the glowing instruments and the violent storm outside. Then, through the rain, something appeared. Lights. The base. Relief flooded through the helicopter. But the hardest part was still ahead. Landing. Emily's hands shook again as the runway lights grew closer. The radio voice guided her carefully. "Lower altitude, reduce speed, easy, steady." The helicopter descended slowly through the rain. 10 seconds felt like 10 years. Then, the landing skids touched the ground. A heavy thud echoed through the aircraft. Silence followed. The storm still raged outside, but inside the helicopter no one spoke. They were alive. Rescue crews rushed toward the aircraft as the doors opened. Emily sat frozen in the pilot's seat, her hands still gripping the controls. One of the Navy SEALs placed a hand on her shoulder. His voice was quiet, filled with emotion. "You saved all of us." Emily finally released the controls. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization of what had just happened. She hadn't been a pilot. She hadn't been a hero. She had simply been someone who refused to give up when everyone believed the end had come. Sometimes courage doesn't come from the strongest soldier or the most experienced leader. Sometimes it comes from the quiet person no one expected. Before this story ends, we have a special request for you. Comment the word courage below if you believe ordinary people can do extraordinary things in the most impossible moments. The wounded soldiers survived. The SEAL team returned safely to duty months later. And the rookie nurse who once doubted herself became a legend on that base, not because she was fearless, but because she chose to act despite her fear. Stories like this remind us that heroes are often hidden in plain sight. If this story touched your heart or inspired you today, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the strength of the human spirit. Because sometimes, the person who saves everyone is the one no one expected at all.